ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, everybody and subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, so we're going to talk about X-Men 97 Episode 6, Life Death Part 2. This is, well, as you might imagine, the finale of the Life Death story arc, but this episode also does some really interesting things in that, kind of similar to what we saw with the Motendo episode, where we clearly saw it was called Motendo / Life Death Part 1. They don't do that with this one, even though there's a whole ass other story arc that is being told here, and it's actually done for good reason, and I'll talk a little bit more after we kind of get some of this out of the way about why I'm perfectly fine with what they did, why I wish they actually would have stuck a little closer to what they did with the Motendo episode. The reason why they don't have that / and then, like, some other random title alongside Life Death Part 2 is because it's about Xavier. I found this really interesting, and once again, I actually went back and, God help me, I watched the final episode of the X-Men animated series 5th season, the series finale as a whole. And one of the things that I remember is that Charles Xavier did not die. He was laid up in the bed. He was still suffering from the effects of what Gyrick did to him that season. And, supposedly he was going to die, but then that's when Empress Lilandra comes along and just whisked him off to the Shi'ar Galaxy. The X-Men knew precisely where he was going, and yet for whatever reason everyone was pretending, or at least acting, as though he had somehow died. When you watch that final piece of that episode, at no point does Xavier say anything about wiping anyone's mind or making them forget that he actually flew off into space. But when you get to the start of X-Men 97 episode 1, it is pretty much implied Xavier is legit dead. So yeah, and the way that the trailer was cut for X-Men 97, it pretty much implied the same thing, that Charles is in fact dead. Now, this could also be one of those deals where, the X-Men are just pretending or acting as if he's dead, but there's lots of stuff that comes up over the course of the season that kind of implies that he is legit dead, and they just decided to retcon or, that whole ending of the original series. But whatever the case is, Xavier's alive and well, and pretty much as I kind of suspected. He is alive. He was going to come back at some point, though I actually kind of expected maybe they would wait a little later, but considering that this is episode 6 and we only have 4 more episodes left, I guess now is about as good a time as any. And here, Xavier is in the Shi'ar Galaxy. He is in the Empire. He is alongside his boo thing, Empress Lilandra. So yeah, he's just doing his thing and trying to be a part of something greater, and his health is completely back to normal. So there's that. And of course, the Shi'ar don't particularly care for him outside of Lilandra. I feel like a lot of the other characters just tolerate his presence. Blerd does not like him at all and feels like Xavier is going to lead them into trying to turn Earth into their throne world, which, to be fair, is not the case. Nothing about this is ever said between Xavier and Lilandra. This is just Blerd fear-mongering. To be fair, a lot of times when people fear-monger or make accusations of that magnitude, it's usually a self-report. It's really just more likely she wants to take over the Earth, because that's what the Shi'ar do. The Shi'ar are colonizers, by and large, and that is something that, I was gonna save this for a little later in the video, but there are a couple of different moments that kind of let you know that the people working on this show, specifically Beau DeMayo and a lot of the other creatives and directors that are on each of these episodes, you can tell that the attention to detail kind of skews towards some of the more recent comics. While I know that Beau DeMayo was very open about the fact that he didn't particularly care for any of the House of X era or Krakoa era stuff with X-Men, there have been multiple moments where you can tell he took the things that, at the very least, he either liked or knew fans would like. Case in point, the Genosha arc from the previous episode, a lot of it just smacks of Krakoa, even down to the fact that they had a Hellfire Gala and a Quiet Council. So there's that. Getting to this, the part where Charles Xavier is trying to get to the hearts and minds of the Shi'ar delegates and try and help them understand that he's not their enemy. There's a part where he informs them of their problematic ways, bringing up the fact that they are in fact colonizers, that they go across the galaxy promising to raise up these people, but ultimately they kneecap them and make them dependent upon the Shi'ar galaxy. This is actually kind of a hint and a nod. While this is technically stuff that is from that era of comics, it was more deeply dived into recently, the very specifics of how it worked in the recent Steve Orlando's Marauder series. It was a whole thing where they were talking about the first blood spilled and how the Shi'ar had been to Earth plenty of times back in like prehistoria, and all the terrible things they had done to symbiotes and other alien species. And yeah, they've done tons of terrible things, and I kind of thought it was cool that they kind of addressed that. And we also do get to see some other cool stuff. Gladiator returns. We get to see the Shi'ar Imperial Guard and all that good stuff. And among them is Vulcan, the long-lost brother of Cyclops and Havoc. So that's a cool thing in and of itself to see. So I really like that. That was actually pretty slick. I don't know what they're gonna do with Vulcan like any further, because this is just one of those things. It's kind of just a cameo, but it is interesting and not out of place, because Vulcan did at a later point go to the Shi'ar galaxy and become the ruler of them, if only for well, it seemed like a brief amount of time. But I mean, he's not a permanent fixture of that, clearly, because in the comics, if you don't know, the leader of the Shi'ar right now currently is the daughter of Charles Xavier and Empress Lilandra, a young Shi'ar mutant by the name of Xandra. She actually has the exact same powers as Xavier. Not as powerful, but she definitely has the potential. She's still young and still learning her abilities. But yeah, getting away from that, I did like how Xavier's just doing his normal thing. Xavier's being Xavier. He gets to be cool for a little bit, because yeah, this is an episode that does focus on him a fair bit. Much to the point that I kind of wish that they would have, as I said earlier, that they would have done similar to the Motendo episode, where once again, you had Motendo / Life Death Part 1. This was just called Life Death Part 2, so you wouldn't really expect there to be anything else going on in the story, considering how they're framing a lot of these episodes. What I wish if they would have done it, and I'm not saying they had to put a / in there and add the title, but what I'm saying is what I wish they would have done is I wish they would have done the life death part first, and then like when you got to the end of that arc, like just don't cut back and forth, just stick with it. And then once you got to the end of that part, just when you think like, oh my god, this is a crazy thing, because we're going to talk about here some of the stuff that happens with Storm, and then you go into the Xavier stuff. I feel like that would have hit different. You would have not have expected Xavier to show up after any of that Storm business. I wish they would have done it that way, but once again, it was not my show, and I can't tell them what the hell to do. So I'm not gonna, even though I kind of just did. That said, to get into the Storm business, which I thought was really good, they did some really interesting things with this. I've talked about before how they're not going to one-to-one adapt any particular X-Men story arc at any point. So you just, it's better if you don't expect it. But they did do what I thought was probably the best version of whatever it was that they were planning. And it's that instead of having Forge be the one to give her powers back, Storm just wills them back to herself. Now, one could make the argument that Forge's machines worked, and it was just Storm in her own head that kept her from being able to command the power that was hers by birthright. But at the same time, I do kind of like leaning more in the direction of Storm just simply being able to accept that she is who she is, that the fear she had, that while technically, yes, she was robbed of her powers, that at the end of the day, it was only temporary, and she just only needed to get out of her own head, accept those fears and doubts, face them head on, and then those powers would come back, because they never really truly permanently left her. It was just all a mental, emotional blocking. And that mental block, that emotional block that she was going through, a lot of it had to do with the adversary, and the adversary was used really well here. I will definitely say I didn't catch it in the first appearance of the adversary in the Motendo Life Death Part 1 episode, but I always felt like, man, that voice sounds really familiar. It's because it should. It's because it's also Allison Seeley Smith who voices Storm, so it lent even more credence to the concept that this was all just Storm's own doing that was keeping her from accessing those powers. So facing that fear, facing the adversary, who in this particular instance, the adversary in this was a little too recent for anyone in the X-Men 97 office to actually be able to reference, because, you know, once again, these things have been made. I want to say X-Men 97 was completed over a year ago. And this is a story arc that literally happened just in the last little bit. So I don't know, maybe there was some crosstalk, maybe some people behind the scenes have spoken with some people at Marvel or vice versa. But the way that the adversary is portrayed to be a lot more like the Shadow King is very interesting, because that's something that was revealed recently in Resurrection of Magneto, is that the adversary is just another facet of the Shadow King. It's not a separate entity. I mean, technically it is, but at the end of the day, it's still the Shadow King. And while this was always something that was hinted at in the earlier comics, it was never something that was explicitly stated. And while it's not even explicitly stated in this episode, it's the actions of the adversary that give the whole game away. The fact that it is trying to prey on Storm's, you know, insecurities and her fears the same way that the Shadow King precisely does. Basically, it's almost as if like the adversary just said, hey man, let me peek at your homework real quick. I'm just gonna put my name on it. That cool? Like that's basically what it is. And it kind of was nice to see that, you know, while the Shadow King is not, you know, doesn't have a presence in X-Men 97, they still use the Shadow King in a roundabout way. So I thought that was cool. Also, you know, getting her powers back, I finally feel like maybe now all of the Storm Mohawk haters can finally shut the up. Like, I was like, bruh, I was like, when it happened, I kind of already feel like I know what the narrative is going to be. It's gonna be, see, they listened to us. They listened to us. They knew we didn't like that shit. They finally got rid of it. See, it was us. Us going on Twitter and yelling and bullying and screaming at the X-Men 97 people. We made them change it. Here's the thing. The show was completed over a year ago. The animation was very likely had been done. And the whole time that y'all were getting angry and mad and freaking out about it, you know what the people at X-Men 97, you know, the office was doing? They were probably laughing at you. Like there was probably one person that was getting ready to jump in the comments and be like, well, actually, and then, you know, there's probably somebody, probably even Bo DeMay at that point, somebody probably jumped in front and was like, what? Let him eat crow later. I think people really need to calm down about that sort of stuff. Like, I mean, I was excited because, well, for one, I like both versions of Storm. Like, I have not just both. I like most, if not all, versions of Storm, you know, from a look perspective. So for me, I didn't really care. Like, it didn't bother me one way or the other. Matter of fact, when I saw that, you know, in the promotional material, when it was initially announced that Storm was going to have a mohawk, I already knew the assignment. I already knew where we were going. I already knew life death was going to be a thing. I already knew Storm at some point was going to lose her powers and then get them back, and then she would go back to her original, or not her original look, but go back to her more classic look. And that's exactly what they did. They literally did the thing. They literally did the thing. They put her back in her OG original giant size X-Men #1 fit. The classic black with the crown, with the tiara and all that shit. And someone is probably still going to find a reason to complain. Oh, it looks too retro. Oh, it looks stupid. Here's the thing. That's the costume Storm has gone back to more than any other costume. That's like, honestly, of all the costumes she has had throughout the years, that one is probably the closest thing to a default costume. And while, don't get me wrong, the 90s fit, it grew on me, but I was never the hugest fan of the all like white and silver, whatever. It was like, nah, I'm good. It clashed with her white hair, and I was never that, like, of any of the fits that she has ever worn, that's probably the one I've liked the least. And then there was that brief moment in the 90s where she was kind of rocking a Halle Berry kind of dude, but that's another story altogether. The whole point of that is just to say that, yeah, I liked what they did with it. What they did with Forge as well, showcasing that he had some skill and magic, something that I think a lot of people don't associate with Forge, but is actually something from the comics. He actually used a combination of technology and magic to help Storm get her powers back in the, that particular arc of X-Men. So, it was nice to kind of see that as well. Now, to get into the next part of it, like, and this is something that happens in both segments, is that I felt that the way that they handled the Genosha massacre was pretty interesting, because I know a lot of people after that episode were just expecting to dive right back in, like they were prepared to have to deal with the aftermath, like right then and there, and it does not happen. You do not get that. It is largely only referenced in passing, or not even in passing, but just like it's already happened. And the characters who we were focused on, Xavier and Storm, they're only learning about it in this episode, whereas Storm kind of learns the same way the X-Men do. She turns on the TV, sees Trish Tilby giving the report, talking about what happened, how many people were massacred, so on and so forth. And then earlier in the episode, we see Xavier learn, but he learns via a psychic vision. Like, at first, he just sees Gambit. And I think that's actually very telling, the fact that he only sees Gambit. But he also sees Gambit, and then suddenly his guise turns into a skeleton. And mind you, the whole time, Gambit's giant size, so I mean, that's also ominous in and of itself. And then, his face starts kind of, having the same effect, that same green light effect as the Wild Sentinel did. And that kind of just lets Charles know what he needs to know. Like, he knows something really bad has happened. He's kind of, relaying some of the events, that have occurred. And it lets you know that, yeah, he's going to go back. And he's going to reveal his presence to his X-Men. And that part, I don't think we're going to see the fruit of that, like, right away. I feel like he's not going to show up till we get to that 3-parter. The next episode is going to be called Bright Eyes. We're also going to get a 3-parter called Tolerance is Extinction, part 1, 2, and 3. So I have a feeling he'll probably show up somewhere in the middle of that, is what makes the most sense. Outside of that, fantastic episode. Once again, not the gut wrencher that everyone was probably expecting, but just solid all the way through. Some other stuff that kind of pops up too that I thought was of note. We get it's not a stinger really, but like they kind of treat it like one. I'm almost shocked they didn't use it as one, but they haven't really done stingers for any of the episodes. But they literally just put it like dead ass at the end. Is you see Bolivar Trask like running from somebody, and it's pretty obvious that it's Mr. Sinister. So Sinister is the guy who is behind all of it. He was the guy who is behind why that Wild Sentinel went to Genosha, because he got Bolivar Trask DNA and used it to, which in kind of a roundabout way is very similar to the E for Extinction story arc, because that's what Cassandra Nova did. She didn't use Bolivar Trask, but like a descendant of Bolivar Trask, and used his DNA to activate the wild master mold that she found. And that's where those Wild Sentinels come from. So they just kind of replaced Cassandra Nova with Sinister. I was actually kind of hoping for Bastion to show up, but honestly, for Bastion, I'm almost kind of glad that maybe that wasn't the case. Because then he just would have been introduced late, and then it would have felt like a rush. So I'm actually glad they went with Sinister. Another quick thing, this is kind of a nothing thing, but just something I thought was noteworthy, is that Nightcrawler is in the main cast, or treated as main cast, considering that he is in the introduction for the episode, but he ain't in the episode. But yeah, he shows up, like they have he has a little title and all that stuff, just like all the other X-Men. Thought that was cute. And we also got to see Nimrod in the intro, which it kind of set me up to think, oh, maybe they are gonna introduce something along those lines. But it was really just kind of more of a tease of what I just talked about that happens at the end, more in regards to Sinister. But yeah, Nimrod coming out of the Master Mold, fighting Bishop and Storm and Wolverine of Days of Future Past was pretty damn neat to see. But once again, it's all stuff that it's just in the intro. Sometimes the stuff in the intro can kind of give you a hint of things you're going to see, like case in point when we saw Apocalypse and Cable facing off in the previous episode's intro, and then guess who showed up? Not Apocalypse, but Cable. Cable showed up. So yeah, I thought that part was really cool. I thought the part was really cool. Yeah, the whole, even though technically there was no Master Mold, there was no Nimrod. In the episode itself, the reveal that Sinister was the one who, got access to Master Mold was pretty neat. But yeah, all around, fantastic episode, and really interested to see how people are going to respond, to these next few episodes, because I can tell you right now, I don't think any of it is going to go the way a lot of people think it is. I mean, yeah, time travel will definitely play a factor, I think, in this, but I'm not gonna lie. If they actually let some of that stick, and I don't think they will, for one, because Cable's involved, and we know Cable factors in a little bit more than what people might expect. Whenever Cable's involved, there's gonna be time travel shenanigans, and it would be very reminiscent of the last few episodes of the first season of X-Men, where time travel played a major role. So yeah, it's almost like a coming full circle. But man, it would be funny if they didn't use time travel at all and just let Gambit stay dead. I'm not gonna lie, that would be kind of gangster. I know it would piss a lot of people off. It would literally get everybody to be like, "Oh!" There would be a lot of people canceling their Disney Plus. You would. You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.